Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Sutras here, a great double feature for you today. 2 panels from Terrificon that are interlinked because of the people on the panels. A great look at Marvel Cosmic, an astronomy class, if you will. And that means it's time for another edition of Word Balloon 101. That's right, everybody's back to school. We're in the groove of classes again as I mill around these hallways. We're going to the observatory now to take a look at the stars and the cosmic world from a Marvel point of view, because 2 great panels happened at Terrificon. Amazing conversations. Very excited to share them with you on today's Word Balloon. First up, a look at the Infinity Gauntlet by the team behind the book, the great Jim Starlin. An incredible conversation with Jim. Also, Ron Lim, the guy who took over for George Perez pretty quickly as the original Infinity Gauntlet series went underway, and then, of course, the subsequent series. Ron was the go-to artist. And the man who had to make George Perez and Ron Lim look the same, that's inker Joe Rubenstien, a great unsung hero of Marvel's history, and DC's for that matter. We've had Joe on before to talk about OHOTMU, the official Marvel handbook of the Marvel Universe, or the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. I'm getting OHOTMU wrong as far as what the anagram stands for. And we get into not only what Joe was able to do to match Ron Lim and George Perez's style, but also things about like the Krusty Bunkers. Do you know who the Krusty Bunkers are? You will when you hear the panel. So that's part 1. And then a continuation of the conversation with Jim, because the following morning I had him and Roy Thomas talk about the history of Marvel Cosmic. And that really got into some very interesting behind-the-scenes things. Did you know Jim was fired from Iron Man? And they do that story of why. And, of course, you know, that's where Thanos was born, was on Iron Man with Jim Starlin and Steve Gerber. But lots of really interesting stuff. Of course, the Infinity Gauntlet story led to the Marvel movie Infinity War. For you newbies out there, you should go back and read the original story. It's pretty cool. And, no, it's really just great, interesting nuggets of Marvel history from a bunch of guys that actually lived it. So first up again, Jim Starlin, Ron Lim, and Joe Rubenstien talking the Infinity Gauntlet. Then in part 2, it's Jim Starlin and Roy Thomas talking about the history of Marvel Cosmic. All on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, as always, League, for your support. We're at the beginning of the month, and really it helps to get to the next conventions. New York is coming up in a couple weeks. I will be there. If you're in the New York area, I hope I meet you at the con. Give me a chance to thank you for listening to Word Balloon and supporting Word Balloon over the years. It's a big help. Lots of big developments happening with Word Balloon in the next couple weeks. Don't worry, subscribers. We're moving platforms, but it should be a seamless transition, and you should be able to get there without any issues. But really interesting moment here at Word Balloon, and I'm very excited about it. And I'll share you more details once they kick in. They should be kicking in this week. But right now, at the time of this recording, they haven't yet. But don't worry, I'll keep you informed. But thank you very much. Do you think Word Balloon is worth $1 a month? Do you think it's worth the price of a comic book a month? Do I provide enough comic book entertainment and information that it enhances what we love about comics in the pop culture world? If you do, if you can afford it, go to patreon.com/wordballoon. You can subscribe to Word Balloon there. I've been giving you advance sneaks of interviews and panels from Terrificon. A lot of stuff is up there now, including the 80th anniversary Superman panel featuring Roger Stern, Jerry Ordway, Paul Kupperberg, Pete Tomasi. Am I forgetting somebody? I don't think so. And then the Robin panel was Denny O'Neil, Mike Barr, Jim Starlin, Pete Tomasi, and Tim Seeley. Both of those conversations right now exclusive only to Patreon subscribers. So if you'd like to subscribe, go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the Patreon ad right there on the front page of wordballoon.com. Thank you for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. This episode of Word Balloon is sponsored by Aftershock Comics, shaking things up at your local comic shop right now with hit series like Animosity from Marguerite Bennett and Raphael De La Tour, Baby Teeth with Donnie Cates and Gary Brown, and A Walk Through Hell by Garth Ennis and Goran Sudzuka, as well as exciting new titles like Hot Lunch Special from Elliot Royale and Jorge Fornes, Beyonders by Paul Jenkins and Wesley St. Clair, and today's focus, The Art of Jim Starlin by, of course, Jim Starlin. Check out what's rumbling now at AftershockComics.com. We're going to tell you more about the art of Jim Starlin in just a few minutes. But right now, let's get into our conversation about one of Jim Starlin's great creations, the Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet, with the creative team behind the original Infinity War comic book. And that was, of course, Jim Starlin, Ron Lim, and Joe Rubenstien. Here they are now, live from Terrificon on Word Balloon. We're doing the Infinity Gauntlet right now. My name's John Suntress. I host a podcast called Word Balloon. Obviously, the Infinity War of Avengers, big thing, and it really started with this incredible story. Yeah, I don't know if you heard about that. Yeah, I don't know if you. They did something with your story, Jim. But no, this is great. I'm really excited to be talking to these guys who are so important with the Infinity Saga and so many stories. So. I'm going to start with the gentleman next to me, inker extraordinaire on so many classic great stories, and the guy that really held the continuity of the Infinity Saga together as it changed artists. Joe Rubenstien, everybody. And then I'll jump over to the artist who has been doing the majority of the Infinity Saga and a lot of other great Marvel works, the great Ron Lim. And then these guys are all responsible for a good deal of Marvel Cosmic, but certainly the writers' contributions speak for themselves. Jim Starlin, everybody. So, Jim, as Jim encourages more applause, which I understand. It all starts with Thanos, though, Jim.
Give him the knee. All right, fine.
Okay. So tell us about the creation of Thanos, and it started in Iron Man, correct?
Oh, that again.
Iron Man 55, but it started before then. Started in junior college. I took a psychology class, and we had a guest speaker who came in and talked about the Freudian concepts of Thanos and Eros, the lighter and darker sides of human nature. I latched onto the darker side, of course. I'm working on the lighter side now. Alan Davis and I are working on that now. But I came to Marvel, and Thanos was part of my portfolio that got me my first job, which was a 5-page love story that involved Tom the truck driver, Dick the dude, and Wendy the waitress. Alliteration was big back then. Basically, when George Tuska, who was the regular penciler on Iron Man at the time, had to go in for an operation. Roy Thomas asked me to come in with Mike Friedrichs and do a fill-in issue, and that's when I pulled out Thanos and Drax and put them into the book, and then we did the second issue with Steve Gerber, and Stan hated it and fired both me and Gerber. So it was an inauspicious beginning. It worked out okay in the end.
Have you had a chance to remind Stan in recent years? You fired me over Thanos.
He's fired me a couple of times. I'm sure even he remembers at this point.
Talk, Joe. Yeah, by all means.
I have a question for Mr. Starlin. Did you want to be a writer who somebody who drew other people's stories, or did you always conceive of yourself as doing the whole package?
I started, long story. I'll keep it short. I started off as a penciler. I wanted to be a penciler. Always wanted to tell stories, and so I contributed to the plots right from the start. Somebody asked me to fill in a couple pages of an Iron Man story, which I drew, and then the script came in, and I looked at it, and it was Happy Hogan stepping out of an office and kicking over a trash can, and his line was, "Look what that woman has made me become, a litter bug." And I thought, I think I can do better than this. Then I really enjoyed writing because I realized that you can write 25,000 cavalrymen charged over the globe and not have to draw it.
Right.
So that sort of got me into the business of writing.
What was, both Joe and Ron, what were your first Marvel Cosmic stories?
Cosmic stories? Wait.
Yeah. Well, the cosmic.
Mine was Surfer, actually. Because I was working on Cyforce for the New Universe before that, and then my editor was Craig Anderson, and I said, and I guess Marshall was leaving Surfer, and they're like...
Marshall Rogers was leaving Surfer? Okay.
Looking for new artists. Yeah. And then so I said, can I try out? And they're like, Yeah, sure, try out. And I was like, oh, I did comics for like a year for Marvel at that time, so I was like, all right, I tried it out. Nothing I would get it. Then he called me up and says, you got the book. What? I'm not ready for this.
How long were you on surfing?
About 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, longest run, forever, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Jeez. Ron, are you on our Marvel Cosmic panel tomorrow?
No.
Oh, man.
Come on in.
Yeah, man. If you well, again, I don't want to like blow any commissions for you or anything, but if you got time, yeah, man, I think you should be there. Joe, how about your Marvel Cosmic involvement?
Well, I think firstly, your first job was I was the inker.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. And my first cosmic job was Avengers Annual number 7, 2-in-1 annual over this guy.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
So my very first Marvel job was when I was 19 years old, and Mr. Starlin, who I used to think was Jim Starlin, and somebody said, "Oh, look,
Jack's brother."
Right. No, that's true. I was at a party. Said, "Who's that guy?" It says, "Oh, it's Jim Starlin." But Jim Sparling? I like his work, and but so I'm so glad you're here for multiple reasons. One of which is, you walked up to me at a party and went, "You want the Avengers Annual?" I went, "Yeah, sure." Why did you ask me to do it? It's like I was hanging out. I was 19.
Probably drunk.
Okay.
No, I'm sure I saw your hard work up at Continuity or something like that, and I thought you'd do a good job.
Thank you. I mean,
But I probably was wrong.
Both drunk. Unlike the altered state you're in right now.
No.
Okay. But it's like I was thrilled because there were all these artists at Marvel I was chomping to work with, like John Buscema, Gene Colan, and I was at DC. I started work at DC when I was 17 years old. So I was doing that stuff, and then Jim walks up to me, and it's like so many things in life. It's like, yeah, sure, okay. And then you look back, and it's like complete pivotal moment in your life. Everything changed, you know. And I mean, I turned to Steve Lealoha, who was an inker on Jim's work and a wonderful artist. I went, yes. How come you didn't ink it? He went, I don't know, because I was busy. And that was that. And the funny thing is, over the next 30 years, they reprinted that thing like 10 times. Like every time you turned around, there was another reprint of it.
That's the thing that got Thanos into the Marvel movie universe. Josh Brolin, that was one, or Josh
Whedon.
Whedon, thank you, says that was one of his favorite comics when he was a kid.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's excellent. That's amazing. And I'm going to probably ask this question again tomorrow when we're talking Marvel Cosmic in general, but I'm really interested in that great period in the 70s when there was more speculation that Chariots of the Gods, Eric von Daniken, Danken period, and all these different things of, what was the mystery of the pyramids? Did aliens do it? And all the cave drawings of what looked like, alien astronauts and things like that.
It was a guy named Ralph. I have proof.
He inspired all this. No, I honestly, it seemed like that stuff was in the zeitgeist in a different way than, certainly I know Kirby was so blown away by 2001 and things like that. That also came from the NASA realities of space exploration. And I wondered if, as the mythology of what the cave drawings showed us and the Egyptians and how people tried to spin that into sci-fi, if that stuff was ever in your guys' minds.
No, my intake was more like Wilhelm Reich and Carlos Castaneda, the Don Juan stories.
Oh, really?
I wanted to do sort of mysticism and science fiction, and I knew what light years were, but I really didn't want to get the science into it. I wanted to get the story into it, and those are the kind of things I wanted to do, as more sort of spiritual mind-blowing. I mean, all my characters go on trips when they go on story. Captain Marvel became a warrior who became a holy man. Warlock became a holy man who became a paranoid, schizophrenic, suicidal man. So they change.
That's excellent. That's great. And seriously, folks, if you want to chime in, because really this is a great opportunity to talk very much cosmically and stuff. Sir?
Why did you decide to stop the character of Warlock? Because I remember you had like a character arc.
Why did you decide to stop the character of Warlock?
When I saw a story where it's like he went to paradise, and at the end, that's the end of one of their sagas.
Well, the reason I ended my run on Warlock was twofold. One, I had a spat with Marvel editorial, and two, for the first time, and maybe the only time in comic book history, a number of books had to be canceled up at Marvel because they ran out of paper. War of the Worlds, Warlock, and I think Luke Cage all got canceled at that point because the Canadian supplier just didn't have any paper for them, and so a number of the low-hanging fruit got snipped and tossed out.
Wow. Around what year? Early 80s?
No, this was
Late 70s?
This was when
Late
I
70s.
was working on Warlock.
Okay,
It was just
okay.
after I quit. This all happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then you was this the period where Dreadstar and all that stuff came, or was that much later?
I think I went over and did Superman for a while first, and
Okay.
no, maybe Dreadstar did come in after that, because I was working, I'm a little hazy on the things, and plus I've been working on Dreadstar for the last 3 months, so
Outstanding. Good to hear.
fixing up the things for a massive reprint.
That's fantastic.
But I'm really bad at years. So
Okay, man. It's all good.
You'd have to have
No problem.
What's the name of the character, the tall guy with the
Syzygy.
Syzygy?
He was.
One day, Jim Starlin walks up to me and says, "I need you to pose for me, but here, get in your underwear and put this towel on." And
He made the mistake of coming into my studio.
yeah. And you know, I couldn't afford to pay him that much to take the pictures, but there's a whole set of me going. And I mean, in the pictures, my character's like a generous 5'5". And then when he gets exploded, what do I go, 6'4" or something?
You're up to 7 feet.
So
And I don't use you for the reference after that.
no, I know. What, you couldn't like? You know. All right. So if you buy the Price, which is the black and white painted origin of Dreadstar, I'm the guy walking around with a beard and hair, and
That's awesome.
and there's a woman in it named Sister Marion, who was my girlfriend at the time.
Hilarious.
So I point that out to people that I used to look like that.
A little known fact, which I haven't really brought up too often, was that Syzygy was supposed to be a black character. And I actually had somebody coming in that day that Joe showed up, but he couldn't make it. And at the last moment, because of the things, Syzygy became a white guy because
Joe is.
my model didn't show up.
I
was
could have
working
gone
with
black.
photo reference on
Right,
stuff
right.
at that point. Yeah.
That's excellent. Now, Sunday, we're going to do a Robin panel and get into Jim's run at DC and the death of Jason Todd and all of that stuff.
It would be gruesome.
Oh, well, I look forward to the story. So if you're here all weekend, you want to check that out Sunday afternoon. But let's get back to the event itself, the Infinity Gauntlet, and what started multiple Infinity sagas and stories. Well, first of all, what brought you back to Marvel?
I had killed Robin.
Sure. So that was a bit. So Marvel took notice of that,
No. DC.
or they were mad at you.
It was their best-selling book that year.
Yeah.
And as a reward, they dried up all my business because they suddenly realized they had all these lunch boxes and pajamas with Robin on it. And somebody had to get blamed for this.
Oh my God!
And so, well,
You're not gonna jump Denny on Sunday, are you? You're gonna.
no,
Okay,
I
good.
bragged on this enough.
Okay, good.
Because he went on all the talk shows when the first thing came out and said, "Oh yeah, my idea. I thought it was great." And then when it came down to the shit hitting the fan, I got it. And so I went over to Marvel and started on the Silver Surfer. And every time I get fired, it works into something much better.
You're fired.
Man, crazy.
Isn't it interesting to the fans that books got canceled because we ran out of paper? Jim Starlin goes to Marvel because somebody says, "Don't do that again." I mean, it's like you don't know about all the currents and all the politics that happen. You just buy the comic book and wonder, how come Ron Lim's not on the Silver Surfer anymore?
Right.
Just, there might. I mean, as collectors, without mentioning names, would you like to know who embezzled and who stole?
Yes.
And who was a horrible human being?
Yes.
And who was an but
Can I leave the room before you start telling
Yeah, I know. But at the same time, it's like there's, all right. So I'm a painter, and one of my big influences is Degas. And Degas was a raving anti-Semite and Jewish. So when I look at the stuff, I kind of separate that from it, you know? So can you pick up a comic book by your favorite artist and go, oh, I heard about this guy. He's not a nice man.
Yes.
Can you separate? I don't know.
Vinnie Coletta. Vinnie Coletta drew beautiful women. And I know he was a scoundrel and kind of mean.
Scoundrel.
That's good word.
That's poetic.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm, trying to. There might be a couple of kids, but but that's what honestly, and it would erase Kirby's stuff, and
Hey, you want it done by Thursday? I can get it done by Thursday.
Well, hey, man.
Okay, but these people back here, my background guy, those are backgrounds. You ain't those.
Right.
Okay. Vinny was very proud that if you said, "Can I have 100 pages by Wednesday?" they were in. He was very proud that he got the publishers to save money because the work got done.
I wondered, Ron, if in fact you coming in, because the Infinity Gauntlet started with Perez, and then went to you.
Yeah.
Because I know, is everyone aware of the phrase "the crusty bunkers"? And Joe, I don't know if you were a crusty bunker.
I was a crusty bunker.
Joe's a and I don't Ron. I don't know.
Occasionally.
Right.
Okay, there you go. So, and Ron, were you basically, and actually, Joe and Jim, and explained what crusty bunkers were.
Crusty Bunkers were a group of artists who would meet up at Continuity, and usually they gathered to help Alan Weiss meet his
Others too, like Brunner.
Yeah, but Alan was the mainstay. Every time you had a 6-page job, there was a Crusty Bunkers emergency.
And they looked good.
Yeah.
Of course, by the way, when Jim said continuity, it means Continuity Associates, which was Neil Adams' studio, which was Neil being one of the great comic book artists and a groundbreaker. He had studios in Manhattan, so whenever you handed in a job, because you had to live in the tri-state area in those days, no FedEx, no computer. So you got done at DC, done at Marvel, you went by Continuity, you saw what Neil had, and maybe he'd go, like Jeff Jones walked in one day and went, hey Jeff, you want to ink a panel? He went, all right. And he inked the panel, and that was cool. You got Jeff Jones to ink something. And sometimes people went, all right, I can take 3 or 4 pages and I'll be back on Thursday. And Neil was the predominant look of the book. He would do the big heads and the big figures. And the jobs got done.
So that's the crusty bunkers would get things done by the deadline. And honestly, that is the fascination I have on both sides of looking at the art and reading the stories, but also knowing the background stories. No, that is part of the interesting thing, because this is deadline commercial art. It has to get done. It has to be there. And it's really, guys, what do you think, honestly, all three of you, as people who had to work under those deadlines? Whereas today, artists do get the license of, hey, you know something, artist X had a bad month. Okay, we're gonna postpone the book and we'll let him finish it. Well, some do. Some get that treatment.
Well, I know that Brian Boland took like 10 months to draw the last issue of Camelot 3000, which is unbelievable. But the jobs I get, look, I was doing a job when DC was moving to Burbank. They did this Convergence series.
Yes.
And they said, I had my own book called World's Finest, and then they needed me for 2 late books. And they went, okay, can you, and you know, the computers have made life harder, not easier. Because it's like, can you get us a page by 4 o'clock? Okay, fine. It's just, all right, can you get us one by 7? Okay, fine. It's just, we really need another page by midnight. It's like, whoa, you know. And so I didn't know people could actually take their time these days, because it'll wear you down. The thing with comic books is, they're a lot of fun. It's great. It's a childhood fantasy. It's what you always wanted to do. It's better than working for a living. Oh, yeah, and can you do 10 pages by Monday?
I was from Detroit in the assembly line, so I worked into this easily.
I understand.
Okay.
So Ron, both as today's deadline thing, but also getting into how you got the job, because again, it started with George Perez,
right?
And then all of a sudden it was co-drawn by you and Joe, of course, doing the inking, and then by issue 3 it was you till the end.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent series.
Well, I mean, I worked with Jim and all this stuff leading up to Gauntlet, and so I was a little disappointed not being able to do Gauntlet, but I understood because it's George Perez, right? I mean, he's the artist I grew up reading,
Sure.
Well. So, but when Craig Anderson, the editor, called me and said, "You want to finish up, the series?" I'm like, well, heck yeah! So yeah, well, I mean,
what happened to George?
What
happened?
Yeah,
to George?
do you have any idea, guys?
Jim? I don't know. To this day, I don't know the true story.
Uh-oh.
I mean,
Story I heard, he quit to become an actor.
Really?
Yeah, he had been doing some off-Broadway stuff, and he quit. At least that's what he told Craig, and Craig told me.
He played both Lionels on the Jeffersons.
So that's all
Nice.
I know about it. I've never actually asked him about it.
That's a
I
while, so
haven't
you don't
seen him
know
all
either.
that. I haven't seen him all that many times since then.
Yeah.
He's usually been in the crowd. And,
Yeah, I only see him passing. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, the guy who kept it. Well, I was just going to say, you really have to hand it to Joe as the anchor, because the look of the book, and honestly, to prepare for this and everything, I was rereading it and stuff. I didn't notice any sort of difference whatsoever.
Well, let me ask you, Ron, did you do anything to try and blend in?
No, I mean,
aping
did-
George's
did you-
style at all,
I
or
really, no,
No, it definitely wasn't George. But
Yeah.
did you say, all right, well, I got to draw this version of
Well, I looked at his pages for reference, just like things in continuity, correct.
And did you feel the need to put in any more details like George did, or you did the amount of details you're always comfortable with?
Yeah, no, I just do normal.
Okay.
I don't
Well,
know,
thanks
I
a lot.
Well, no, I worked with George on a Surfer Superman story,
Right.
and he just loves that details. I mean, he just loves it. He's like, I asked him, I said, that like he drew Doctor Strange's house one day. I was
Right.
like, dude, there's so much stuff in there. Why do you do that? He's like, because I love it. He just loves drawing it.
But in those days, you got a George Perez page and went, this is going to be a lot of work. Now, it's like an after-dinner mint compared to Travis Schwartz and all these guys who George set the standard. Like, I'm not going to let him outdo my details, you know. So,
I have a problem.
man?
okay.
Any other questions, sir?
How did the Infinity Gauntlet evolve from the original Soul Stones?
That's a good question. Yes, how did the Infinity Gauntlet evolve from the original Soul Stones?
Okay, I was raised in a Catholic family, and first few years of schooling, parochial elementary school, sister of crazy out of their head nuns were my teachers. Most of them were John Berkshires.
Wow.
So somewhere along the line, once I started working on coming back to the Surfer and working on Thanos again, some of that Catholicism crept back into my system. I thought I'd worked it all out with Warlock, but I apparently hadn't. And it occurred to me, you know, we're taught that God is this all-powerful, benevolent entity out there. I wonder if he wasn't. I wonder if he was a crazy son of a gun who just wanted to do whatever whim hit him at that time. And so I had thrown the soul gems into the Avengers story that you inked, and they were just sitting around, and then you and Engelhardt had used them with the elders.
Yeah.
And so they were sitting there, and I thought, well, those are the 6 aspects of life, basically. If he becomes masters of those things, well, he becomes omnipotent.
Right.
And so that's where he came from, basically. Blame it on the nuns.
Sir in the gray and the hat.
Well, obviously not a perfect representation. What was it like to see your creation come to life on the big screen?
Well, it's like you said, it's far removed. For one thing, he's got pupils. I'm never going to get used to that. But basically, you know, there's thousands of people between me and it. Maybe I was a gem, and maybe there are some scenes that I recognize from out of the books and that. But they did an incredible job creating that movie and that character. I mean, Brolin must have sat there and scoured these comic books to look to see how he would move. He moved perfectly. You know, it was just, they did, everything worked just perfectly on this thing to all these things coming together. Kevin Feige is obviously an obsessed, crazy madman who will not let the movie out of the studio until like 5 minutes before the premiere because he's making changes up until the last moment. The Russos were, they just wanted, they had the story, and they knew with McFeely and Marcus, they just had to knock things around and put it into this universe and adjust to the fact that there were certain characters. And, you know, and I'm just blown away by the process they did. I couldn't be happier. I'm very proud to be associated with it. Yeah.
Ron, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to hear what both of you guys
Yeah.
think of the movie as well.
I love the movie, first of all. But yeah, the version of Thanos, I was a bit worried. Up until that point, we just saw him kind of laying out the plan. I went to gems, that's it, right? But yeah, to see him fleshed out was pretty amazing. I was blown away.
Well, when I saw the first Avengers movie and it was ending, and I thought, who could they get to reunite? And I went, Thanos. And I went, ooh, I'm right. But I mean, I've been associated, not really associated, but a lot of the movies, I've done a lot of different books, so I can identify with the Captain America movie and the Daredevil movie and all that sort of stuff. And a couple of Wolverines back was actually my Wolverine miniseries in Japan, except it had very little to do with the series itself, which kind of disappointed me. But when I was watching, when I was watching the Thanos Avengers thing, one thing I kept thinking was, why do I keep taking off his helmet? It's a full helmet. But I thought this was the really first time I sat there and went, wow.
Why didn't we do that in the book? Why did he need that armor at the end?
Well, but you did it at the end. Yeah, you had it at the end.
But I looked at it and went, wow, it's my comic book. I saw Thanos beating up on the Avengers. I went, took 43 years, but I recognize this. Because that's how long ago it was. No, 41 years because I was 19. So yeah.
I came at it from a different angle than anybody else because they invited me down to the set of the next movie before the first one was out, and I thought I was not going to learn anything, but it turns out that non-disclosure agreement I had to sign when I came in, all of them had done that a year and a half ago, and they were just dying to tell somebody what they were doing. So I immediately found out everything, so I knew about why they took the helmet out, and I said, gee, that's a good idea. What happened like about 2 weeks before the movie came out, though, they told me that they had a half hour of the Thanos backstory that they were going to have to cut out because it was going to be a 3-hour movie. And I had just been on a plane where I watched the Justice League movie, and I thought, oh God, you take out Thanos' backstory, it's going to be the Justice League movie. And I was horrified. So I show up at this premiere, and I'm thinking of nothing but Bob Kane. Now remember the Batman series in the 1960s? It was the antithesis of everything Bob Kane had done, but he was getting a piece of it, so he probably had to say, I loved it. And I was going to think of, I'm going to hate this movie. And I'm going to have to get out there in public and go, I love it. And I just wasn't sure I could do it. And then the movie, we went to see the premiere, and I went, woo! I ducked that bullet.
Yeah, it is, again, rereading, and just Thanos in general, the love affair with death. And again, I understand NDAs. We don't know what's coming in the second movie, but it's too bad that there isn't room for that.
Well, I can talk about this because other people have talked about it openly. The Marvel cinematic universe, is not ready for the abstract entities yet, like Eternity or Mistress Death. I imagine that's going to change as more of these Doctor Strange movies come out.
Hopefully.
That's why they decided not to use Mistress Death.
Okay.
And back to one of our Silver Surfer things for a motivation.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, there was reasons for what they were doing. They were working a lot of different moving parts into this box. 19 movies.
Absolutely. Yes.
And basically, for what they had to work with, I think they did a fine job.
How many of all of us had friends that aren't into it like we are and said, I hear this Infinity War is really cool. Should I see it? And it's like, no, because it's chapter 20 or chapter 19. You won't. I mean, there's a level of appreciation that's not going to be there. And I honestly, it's almost like a lab experiment of, oh, your mom went and saw Infinity War? What did she think? Did she understand what was happening, or was she just like...
You're like a sea walker, aren't you?
I've actually talked to a number of people who have never been to a Marvel movie before, but went to see it.
And they loved it?
It's great.
Okay,
right.
All right.
By the way...
I'm like this with the trees, you know that. All right.
No, but I mean... It's great. It's great. It's an action thing, and But on a tangent, when Jim said that he went down to see the set, I was reminded. Len told me that he went down to see a Wolverine movie being filmed, and he said it was the scene where Hugh Jackman gets out of bed and stands naked looking out at the window. And he went, I've seen Hugh Jackman's ass more than I ever want to. And I thought there's a lot of people who will disagree with you
I
on that
understand.
one.
Yeah, totally. I like that you called me a C blocker. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Joe, I appreciate that. That's
The only person who appreciated less than Len was the makeup artist.
The fluffer, please.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it at that. I'm sorry. Sir, we'll get you next, but go ahead, sir.
Dracula.
Yeah, Dracula.
The point that you brought up about death, that was actually part of my favorite part of the whole Thanos mythos.
Oh, God, yeah.
Gauntlet, and how he's not just someone who wants to destroy everything, but he's doing it for a purpose to impress and capture his lady love. And
Effed up purpose.
the fact
Yeah, exactly.
that it was missing in the movie, that was such a big thing that kind of caught me, and now I know why. So.
Well, there's also the fact that they've made so much money off Thanos, and Josh Brolin is lobbying to do more Thanos.
Wow.
I mean, he started off going, it's a one-shot. I'm going to do a one-shot. And then 2 months later, can I get in the Eternals? That's wow. So I think there's a chance that Mystery Death will appear down the line. Yeah.
It's such a
The
big
right
part of
variety.
the stories you've done with them, so.
Yeah.
No.
It's Sam and Diane from Sheer.
One moment, so I'm gonna go to this gentleman first, and then you. Go ahead.
I have a question based on one thing I found with you two characters, Thanos and Warlock, is they have very distinct word balloons. That they've always been lettered with a weird word balloon. In your mind, how do you think each of those characters sound? Because they look differently. Obviously, you're not intending them to sound like regular Joes. So.
Which characters?
Yeah, which specific
Thanos
character?
and Animal Warlock.
Oh,
You know how the balloons were always styled very differently from the regular model.
Okay, I think Adam Warlock sounds and looks like Matthew McConaughey.
Okay.
all right.
I was certain. I was almost certain when I saw that Peter Dinklage was in the Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, and they had him at IMDb without the credit underneath which character he played. I was sure he was going to be Pip.
That's true. Yeah, no kidding. Exactly.
Eros, I'd never given any thought to. I'll have to give some thought to on that one. And I got to tell you, Brolin was not on my radar at all as Thanos. I was picturing somebody I thought it was just going to be a voiceover part. So I was picturing like a post-cancerous Arnold Schwarzenegger. Idris Elba, I thought would have been terrific at it. But, I can't imagine anybody but Brolin at this point. And it's not because he hugged me.
Was it great?
Oh, it was.
Really? Okay.
Sir.
I know there's going to be like a Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel movie. Is there going to be any reference to the original
Marvel.
Marvel?
Will there be a Marvel reference in the Captain Marvel movie?
I understand. Well, I've heard that Jude Law is playing inside IMDb. It's listed as Walter Lang, which was Marvel in the original comic books, but everybody else keeps referring to him as Marvel. So apparently he's in there.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and I was going to just say one thing. I love it when they call it the first Marvel graphic novel. I love it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into the death of Marvel tomorrow when we talk Marvel Cosmic and everything. Absolutely. So from an art standpoint, guys, Ron and Joe, was it tougher when it is this kind of big epic and there are dozens of characters and stuff?
Is it more difficult to draw than a regular comic?
Yeah, than a regular.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many characters in there.
Right.
You keep track of everybody. The hardest part actually is keeping track of what costumes they're wearing at that current time.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask.
I kept drawing the Thing, and all of a sudden they came out, they put a helmet on his head. I was like, what?
Oh, that's right. That's when he was scarred.
He got scarred by Wolverine.
Right,
So I was like,
right. Well, and the Hulk in that brown outfit,
Oh, yeah.
and of course,
Yeah.
this is Intelligent Hulk.
Yeah.
So
all that stuff is just more technical stuff, just getting costume reference. Other than that.
Well, I mean, I count on my pencilers actually getting it right, but
Joe?
but when I was doing the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which was like our encyclopedia over the course of 20 years, and I would get this character tank with all this busy costume, I'd go look at the reference, and invariably it was designed by George Perez.
did Jim draw Thanos for Ohatmu?
Oh no! Oh,
drew
you
Thanos?
got ripped off. We used a drawing of yours that was traced. So I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know that you got paid for it.
Hey, man.
Right. You know,
I thought I did.
We'll call CB.
No, it's-
CB's here. We'll let
The one with the big head. The head's too big, right? I think
I
I drew it.
Did you? I think it's the one that came like out of the Avengers annual. But as I thought about it years later, I suddenly realized they kept giving me photostats of pencilers' work to trace in ink, and I went, these guys weren't getting paid.
Wow.
You guys were getting ripped off.
Wow.
No, I think.
All right. Well,
I think
All right.
I mean, I'm the first one to knock Marvel, but
Yeah.
in this particular case, I don't think they actually did
Well,
anything.
I'll tell you one story, and I know Jim Shooter can be a very controversial figure. People have stories, and he's always been a good guy to me. There was a movie called Labyrinth starring David Bowie,
yeah.
right? And they did a comic book adaptation by the incredibly gorgeous, wonderful John Buscema, and they were doing a coloring book of it. And Jim said, "So how are you doing this?" He says, "Oh, we're going to trace the pencils. We don't have to pay anybody." And he went, "No, you're going to pay John Buscema."
Good.
You know, so
That's cool.
my experience is he was looking out for people because you know what they took. My official handbook of the Marvel Universe. They took it and did a 500-page role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I found this thing, and I went up tomorrow. I went, "Can I get some money for this?" And they went, "No, it's not in your contract." Now in those days, they used to pay an inker like $23 a page for reprint.
Wow.
So now we're talking a couple of $1,000, right?
Sure.
But no, it's not in your contract. I went, "Well, can you give me $1 just as sort of a token?" And they're like, "No, we got you."
How about a copy of the game?
Yeah,
Probably not. Yeah, probably not.
every Wolverine T-shirt I've ever owned, I bought at Target.
I believe that.
Yeah.
So was it an easy pitch for the Infinity Gauntlet? And who was the editor-in-chief back then?
Craig Anderson was the editor, and was it Tom?
Tom DeFalco, right?
DeFalco,
Tom
okay.
at that point, and Tom didn't pay any attention to it. I mean, Marvel was owned by a permalitter group at that point, and they were trying to squeeze every cent they could out of your readerships. I'm a writer. I just made that up. So this was a time when the X-Men, each X-Men had his own book or at least a miniseries and that. So anything that sold, they wanted more of. And we did well on the Surfer.
Yeah.
The sales went up, and they said, we wanted a spin-off, so we did the Thanos Quest, and initial sales on the Thanos Quest were so good that they wanted something more before even that came out.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because you were still penciling up all those damn heads and at the end.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They said, okay, we're on to the next one. So I think that was possibly one of the reasons they did do George, is because you were still busy on Thanos Quest.
Oh, was I? Maybe I was.
Yeah, because it came out.
There's so much stuff going on at that time.
Yeah.
Draw faster.
Yeah.
So it was, basically they wanted, the Infinity Gauntlet happened because Marvel couldn't figure out a way to pick you up and shake you until all your chains came out. So they hired me to do that.
Any other questions?
Kid over there.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, sir. Absolutely.
I was wondering how you write such a complex character like Thanos, because there's so much to him.
Well, he's developed over 40 some odd years. Basically, every time I go back to him, I want to add another little facet to him. And every time I sit down and write him, I sit down and write everything I'd done beforehand. So it's not like I've got this encyclopedic knowledge in my head. It's there on, for me to go look back at. And I work on 3x5 cards to set out the story. So, I structure a story like a person builds a house. You got to get a frame first, and then you start doing the elaborations from there. And basically, he's somebody who I really love. It breaks my heart I'm not going to be doing any more of his stories, but I had a lot of fun with him. He was a great villain, hero, complex, and he was the kind of character I would have wanted to read. So that's basically how he came about.
But Jim, when you started to draw Thanos hanging out with Mister's death, she wasn't a girl yet. You started to like build up her chest as the stories went on.
Yeah, I'd had that. I think it was the second issue of Captain Marvel, and I designed it up and I did this hooded figure, and I went, "Who the hell is that?" And I think I did go back and actually up a little bit on that.
Okay.
But she kept getting more feminine as she went along.
But you always knew she was going to be Mistress Death from almost the beginning, or
maybe by the end of the issue, by the time I finished penciling it, I figured it out.
And within all of your years of writing, you never thought, all right, I got to get Thanos here, but that series, I don't have enough time, so maybe 5 years down the line, I'm going to get this aspect of him out. You didn't have it even that?
Oh, I might have some ideas, but most of the time it's, just, that would have been cool. I find creativity works best when it's spontaneous. Captain Marvel 25, there's a creature in it called Eon. He's sort of like this floating thing with an eye and a face on one side.
Right.
Some hair on top. He came about because I was coming back from a party, maybe a little bit inebriated.
So there's a theme.
This was in New York City, and I was stopping at a light, and there was a bag of garbage. There was a garbage truck at the time, and there was a paper bag over by one of the stores, and it had a grease stain. Something was seeping on it, and I sort of looked at the grease stain, and I went, "That's a really fascinating shape." And I immediately ran home and drew it up, and that's where Ian came from. So I like things that kind of happen,
So the hair was asparagus.
It could have been. Later on, there were some broccoli guys.
Right.
In Warlock, there were some.
But I'm still intrigued about your idea of yourself. Are you a writer who draws, or an artist who writes, or is there no difference in your mind?
That's a good question.
Well, seeing that I blew my hand up and can't draw anymore,
now you
I'm a
can't.
writer.
Yeah, but were you an artist who wrote?
I never gave that any thought. I mean, it was just something I did. I'm a storyteller.
Right. Okay.
Just whatever aspect.
So it's just like when Harrison Ford says, "I'm a movie maker," he thinks about, besides my acting, all the other things because he's involved in the totality as you are when you do your story.
Yeah, my mind tends to meander onto things other than that. That's too specific, too concrete.
Okay.
There's a real few.
I'm just a little confused about, you created Thanos, but doesn't Marvel own it? And can't they just, why are they allowing you to develop a character? Why don't they just rip it away and let them?
They have.
They have.
Well, they have, yeah, truly. The last couple.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, and again, nothing against the writers and artists who got the jobs, but no, it's obviously, I'm sure that's a point of view.
It's a work-for-hire job. I mean, I got a little bit better deal than most on the work-for-hire thing because there was some lost paperwork, and so when Thano showed up at the end of the Avengers movie, Marvel and I had to come to terms again on stuff, and that's why he's in the movie and why I went back to work and why.
In the comics, you're doing different adventures, and they're letting you run the project because it's your character, right?
Pretty much, The really good editors would let me run whatever I wanted to because they got good results. Archie Goodwin and I worked together for many, many years because he worked on the philosophy of ain't broke, don't try and fix it. And that's why we did Dreadstar for 40 some odd, or at least 30 before Marvel stopped paying me. That's another story. But basically, they let me do Thanos. Nobody else wanted to do Thanos. He wasn't he wasn't like he is now. He was a cult character. I think Dan Jurgens and John Romita used him once up before the Infinity Gauntlet. Afterwards, Mark Waid had to use him in a Kazar story because it was X-Men's character that they had in the story originally. They couldn't use the X-Men character, so Adam or one of the Kuberts had to redraw all of the X-Men guys into Thanos. What? So it's Thanos versus Kazar, which I always thought was kind of one-sided.
What do you guys think of the evolution, of the Guardians? Man, when they announced the Guardians movie, and I'm friendly with Quesada, I'm friendly with Brian Bendis, and they were part of the Marvel movie panel, and they're like, "We're doing Guardians next," and I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "Is that a good?" I'm like, "God, I don't want this to be the movie that kills all the great success and everything." So yeah, what did you guys think when they are like, "Oh, we're really getting into"?
They started off with Iron Man. I mean, that pretty weird.
Oh, well, I understand, Jim, and you're right about that, because he really was an alien. God, they canceled him a couple times. They turned him into a kid, a teenager and stuff.
I don't think he was even a C-level character at the time.
Yeah. So, I understand. But, so no difference in terms of when it was, why not the Guardians or whatever?
Well, the Guardians had a nice run there for a while under Atlantis and Landy. Is that their name?
Yes.
I mean, that was a fairly successful book.
Abnett Landing,
It actually made more sense than Iron Man. Because, not a lot of people in the general audience knew it, but a lot of folks had read those books, and Gunn was among them. So,
fair enough.
But I'm with you. I thought, Guardians of the Galaxy? Really?
Yeah.
And then it came out, and of course it was fantastic. Somebody on Facebook wrote today, when's the last time you saw really good comedy, a really laugh out loud comedy? Guardians of the Galaxy #1. You don't stop laughing. This stuff's wonderful.
I thought it was original Guardians. I thought it was like...
Right, me too. At first I'm like,
no sense at all.
Vance Astro's going to be in a movie? Okay.
Then I thought those guys, okay.
I was looking forward to the fat guy.
Charlie,
That's awesome. Sir?
What I was going to ask is, as much as I loved Infinity War, one of the things I didn't get in it was that amazing cosmic fortress that Thanos had in the Infinity Gauntlet. Did you create it, or did both of you? I'm just curious, because that was amazing.
George designed that before I started drawing that.
Yeah, I think I gave them, there's stairs. I mean, we set up some parameters. There was a death head, but basically that was his design.
Jim, did you write Marvel style? There's always that talk of full script versus Marvel style.
I did full scripts on it.
Okay.
Somewhere along the line, I gave up on Marvel style.
And building on what Joe asked about Death and how Death became more womanly as you progressed, I also loved that character that Thanos creates, and I can't remember her name.
Terexa,
yes.
I always forget about her. People have been bringing her up and reminding me. I forgot about that.
I did too. It was great to reread that.
It's kind of embarrassing. There's really a lot of misanthropic stuff in there.
But it fits that. But it is kind of this great jealous move. If you guys don't remember the story, where Thanos is just like, "Fine, Death, the hell with you. I'm omnipotent. I'll create my own love thing." She's great. And it really was this kind of, and I guess it was 90s and everything, but it really did feel like that kind of a Baywatch kind of, idealized.
I thought it was narcissism personified.
Absolutely.
I had it in for Nebula, so she got treated really badly on purpose because they said she's Thanos' daughter, and I went, he's never, my Thanos would have never had offspring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he says it. He's like, well, she says she's my daughter, so okay.
So I abused her terribly in the story.
Very decomposed.
I think Gunn's done it even worse.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, it's a little embarrassing at this point. There's a little bit of sadism involved in that. So, but it is Thanos.
Aren't they doing a blow-up doll of her? Because haven't we all at some point made up our own lover? Anyway, go ahead.
Oh my.
Okay, fine.
All right, now we're getting dangerous. Sir, right there, and then you.
So last week I was showing Boston, and I went to the John Byrne camp.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
The stories he talked about was that morning, CB had reached out to him maybe for a project. Well, CB's here this weekend. Has he talked to you?
Me?
Yes, Jim.
I haven't talked to John Byrne in years.
No. He was asking if CB went to Byrne and said, "Hey, let's maybe try and do something new for Marvel." Has CB reached out? CB Cebulski, current editor-in-chief, reached out to you?
Oh no.
Okay.
I don't. Okay, I found out his name now. Okay.
I'm doing a panel with him tomorrow. I can arrange an introduction.
No.
Sir.
I was just wondering, because you created Thanos, and you said earlier that you loved Thanos himself when making him. What was your favorite storyline to put Thanos in, and to really
build on, what was your favorite story?
The Thanos quest.
Yeah.
He's never been nastier than that. That one had all the beats working right on it, and he did a terrific job drawing it. That's my favorite Thanos story.
Yeah, same here. I love Thanos stuff.
Right behind Death of Captain Marvel. That's my favorite story, and Thanos quest comes right behind it.
How about for the two of you guys, your favorite Marvel cosmic stories?
Well, Thanos quest was favorite when I worked.
Well, okay, yeah. So, Joe?
Well, you mean to read or to work on?
Well, to work on.
Oh.
Or read.
Well, I did the Infinity Gauntlet, and what it ended with him sitting there with his, his helmet off and going, "This is cool." I thought,
who has seen the Scarecrow at the end of the movie?
Yeah, I saw.
Who has seen it?
I didn't remember seeing the Scarecrow at the end.
Blu-ray, you see it.
Oh, it's on the Blu-ray.
It's always there, and they kept saying. I went to the premiere and they went, "What did you think of the Scarecrow?" And I went,
"What's Scarecrow?"
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't see it until the fourth viewing.
Okay, good.
Blu-ray.
Yeah, all right. Well, I feel better then because I'm like,
It's really tiny in the lower left-hand corner of the screen.
You know what?
The lower right.
Right.
All of Jim's cosmicness and madness and craziness and shit. I think one of the things that separated Jim from all the people that was writing this stuff was Captain Marvel died of cancer.
Yeah.
He didn't die of zap bam.
Right.
And when Adam Warlock died, and see in the annual, Jim asked to ink that page because obviously it meant something to you. It's like it was a chapter ending and it had some pathos to it. And Pip standing there with the frontal lobotomy and the blood running down his nose. It's like it's like in Watchmen, Batman and all those people beat the hell out of everybody, but Rorschach goes and breaks the guy's finger and go, "Ooh, that would hurt," because it's real. So the fact that Jim keeps killing his people is very that could happen.
Robin blowing up?
Right. Well, yeah.
Blowing up.
Robin,
We've all blown up Robin once or twice.
I'll save my things on Robin until Sunday.
Yeah,
I understand.
No, so I think, Superman is not super unless the world he's walking in looks like it would be rough to beat up. It should be solid, and there should be a reality to why these people walk around. Because, superheroes are like weird, strange shut-ins. It's like we hang out the mansion till something happens so we can go save the world.
Sure.
It's like, shouldn't you have a hobby? Shouldn't you, do Pitbull rescue or something?
I like that. Guys, I'm going to wrap up because we're getting close to the time to transition. But seriously, a great conversation, exceeded my expectations. Ron Lim, Jim Starlin, Joe Rubenstien, thank you for your great work. Thank you for this conversation. Okay, we're between lectures, so let's take a bathroom break, maybe check our hair in the mirror. I never do that. I should do that much more often. Sometimes I know you guys look at me and it looks like I just came out of an explosion or something like that. Anyway, this episode of Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Now, we've been talking a lot about a lot of the great Aftershock books that are out right now. One of them is The Art of Jim Starlin. It's the first time that Aftershock has printed this book. Let me give you the description. With his creations Thanos, Gamora, and Drax the Destroyer occupying such prominent roles in Marvel's cinematic universe. The father of the cosmic soap opera, Jim Starlin's name is synonymous with larger-than-life epics, which is why Aftershock is proud to bring back into print this epic 320-page retrospective on the career of one of the most popular and prolific comic book artists of the last 40 years, covering everything from his humble beginnings to his rise as one of the industry's top creative talents. This oversized volume includes glimpses into Starlin's files and sketchbooks, as well as images of his personal favorites with insights into his life and creative process. The first edition of this volume sold out instantly. Don't be caught short this time. Make sure you order through your local comic shop The Art of Jim Starlin. The diamond code is available at aftershockcomics.com. And just check it out, and you can get it now. Think about The Art of Jim Starlin from Aftershock Comics. All right, now let's get into our next session. Everybody have enough to hit the water fountain? You're all right? You're rehydrated and everything? Because we're into our second lecture now about Marvel Cosmic, going back to the history. And it's timey-wimey that some of this conversation obviously takes place before the Infinity Gauntlet. But we mentioned some things that happened on the Infinity Gauntlet panel, and they come up again with Roy Thomas and Jim in this version of a Talk About Marvel Cosmic. Great stuff, great behind-the-scenes stuff at Marvel. Honestly, I was so pleased at the level of candor that the creatives had at Terrificon. And, these guys are into their careers, and it's not like, hey, you don't like me now? Boo-hoo. Too late. The body of work is there. And I think that's what made for such interesting conversations on these panels. But truly, I was so happy to be a fly on the wall, as I say during this session, because Roy and Jim really get into why books were dropped, why creative teams changed, lots of stuff about the history of Captain Marvel and the Kree Skrull War, and so many other interesting facets from Roy. And then building on that when, Jim came on and put his stamp on Captain Marvel and the Captain Marvel saga and everything that followed. I love this conversation, so really excited to bring it to you now. Roy Thomas, Jim Starlin, talking about the history of Marvel Cosmic, now on Word Balloon.
Welcome to
two-thirds of us.
Exactly. Welcome to two-thirds of us talking the history of Marvel Cosmic. I'm very excited to be doing this panel. My name is John Suntress. I host a podcast called Word Balloon. It's at wordballoon.com, where I get to, when there aren't conventions, have the same kind of conversations we're about to have today. So I'm very excited to present Roy Thomas. And let me tell you about Roy for a second. I'm sure you already know, but Roy is a legendary comic book writer and editor who was Stan Lee's first successor as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. He's known for co-creating some of comics' greatest characters, such as Wolverine, Carol Danvers, Morbius, The Vision, Iron Fist, and Ultron. He also introduced the pulp magazine heroes Conan and Red Sonja, along with the sci-fi fantasy Star Wars, to Marvel. Roy's had lengthy writing stints on Marvel's X-Men and Avengers, and DC Comics All-Star Squadron and Infinity Incorporated. Among many other titles, books, and a couple of movies, he was inducted into the Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame in 2011 and currently edits the comic history magazine Alter Ego and works with Stan Lee on the Spider-Man newspaper strip. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Rascally Roy Thomas.
You left out a comma. I think you left out a comma.
Page 10. No, but that's the kind of career you've had.
We're holding the space till when Jim Starlin gets here, we'll stop.
Absolutely, yes. Jim will be joining us, and
we'll tell you all the real stuff about him until he gets here.
Oh, there he is. Excellent.
Excellent.
I'll give the introduction as he's walking up. Another important voice, not only in Marvel's cosmic world, but DC's cosmic world as well. The creator of Thanos, the Infinity Gauntlet, so many other great creations. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Starlin.
The other one broke too, but we got the ear, so we'll take it back. It's fall to pieces.
Now, I'm recording the audio.
Let's smash it up right here.
For the people who aren't watching this, John Cimino, who is Roy's guy, brought up this wonderful bust of Thanos, and Jim Starlin, who made that bust?
Yeah. Long time ago, yes.
Oh, okay, he did.
Jim, was it 73, 74?
Somewhere around the time I was doing Warlock, I think we did this little bust up.
Yeah, I think probably 74.
I was out in California, so it would have been around 72 or 73.
Oh, you weren't there in New York at the time?
I think I did it in the... no, I did it in California, and then...
Mail?
Brought them back. I came back shortly.
I had a feeling I got it from you in person.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I brought some back, and... there's a bronze one of this. There's two bronzes running around also.
And I just got this thing.
They've got this. This was Hydrostone.
Hydrostone.
Hydrostone doesn't exactly do impact really well.
Well, it mentioned that when Jim gave this to, he it's got a number under it. It's number 100 or something like this, whatever.
Oh, it's
and Jim Salliker. No, who's it? No, Ralph Macchio told me the other day. He has one of them.
Okay.
But what happened is Jim gave me this. I was, really, proud. I didn't know anybody else had one, but anyway, I got one. And so I thought I'm going to really protect it. So it was starting to rain a little outside of New York, or Madison Avenue. So I go out and I get really lucky. I hail a cab, just as it's starting to kind of drizzle. I think I'm going to get this home instead of going to the subway or something. I'm going to protect it. So I'm going to get in. So I hail a cab. Cab pulls over. I get in and knock off one of the little ears, or what would you call it, of the mask on it, so it fell down the New York street with the rain, so I couldn't retrieve it. But I protected, so was it 43, 44, 5 years. Sitting there, on top of a mantle or whatever, always in my office there somewhere. And just now, when we were dragging it around, the other ear fell off. But with this one we have, so we'll be able to glue that back on as soon as we get out to California and everything.
It's the nature of being an editor.
Yeah. I should find some rock outside and stick that on to sort of even it out. But,
Jim, have you done other sculpts of things you've created?
Not too much. Nothing that survived.
Okay.
It was a spell I was going through out in California, so the people liked it, and they did me a bronze cast and kept for themselves. And strangely enough, this particular ear on the bronze cast, there's a little bit of decay on it. So.
What, you mean this version or all of them?
On the bronze version, there's a little bit of decay on it that I haven't been able to get off.
Wow.
Okay, back on to something.
Yeah,
we're here for.
This is the first time I think this is, I don't know if I've ever been exhibited, because I certainly never taken it.
I got to take a picture before you take it away. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's incredible?
We had a picture taken this morning while it still had one ear in it.
Well, and we're here to talk about the history of Marvel Cosmic, which you can obviously argue began with Fantastic Four #1, because it was a space shot that gave the Four their powers. So, Cosmic Rays. What are they? We don't know. We just call them Cosmic Rays. But Roy, I asked Jim this last night when we were talking about the Infinity Gauntlet. I wondered if, as you guys were creating sci-fi stuff, how much of the zeitgeist of not only space exploration from a NASA standpoint, but also I was a little kid when Chariots of the Gods and Eric von Daniken's theories came out, and it really seemed like that was kind of exploding all over the place. And I don't know how much that influenced what you guys did, and you specifically in your writings, of any of those cave drawings and that speculation that the pyramids were created by aliens. And
well, you may have been a little kid when von Daniken wrote his book Chariots of the Gods ? But I was an adult already, so it didn't influence my comics writing very much, except that I came up with a story like that called Man Gods Beyond the Stars or something. I actually ended up having Doug Munch write the story for one of those black and white books, and I was real pleased with that. And we were thinking of making that a series. It didn't become one, but we did that, and Alex Nino did a wonderful job, drawing it. So I was very interested in that and liked to do, things with it. I never believed it, particularly. It might be true, might not be. But it's an interesting speculation. But I was always a science fiction fan from, a kid, whatever there was. I was an early member of the science fiction book club from at least the middle 50s or something like this, when I was 13, 14 years old. I remember, in fact, one of the first books I had was This Island Earth. I didn't like the movie version of it, but the book version by Raymond Jones, which became partly the inspiration, or one of the main inspirations for the Kree Skrull War. The idea that Earth is this little, like a Pacific island in World War II with these two big powers battling it out, and they're just some little island and so forth. And that's why the first chapter of the Kree Skrull War, when Neil and I got into the main part, it became This Battleground Earth. I was doing parodies of all these works, but I read a lot of science fiction, and I liked, whether it was low level or the cosmic stuff, I liked it all.
Let's get into the Kree Skrull War, because obviously that's one of the great epic stories.
It was a way station on the way to what Jim took a couple of steps further.
Absolutely.
I was actually reading them as a service.
Well,
oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
I'm getting a subscription to the mail, and in fact, I got a subscription to Captain Marvel, and it got canceled, and I ended up Captain Marvel and one other book, I forget, and they both got canceled, and they were replaced by 2 subscriptions to the X-Men, which I didn't care about.
But you got twice.
I got it twice a month. the first bad dealings I had with Marvel.
And surely the last, right?
Well, yeah.
Wow. That's insane.
This is smooth ever since.
So, Roy, were you editor writer when you were doing the Kree Skrull, or was it Stan? I mean, who greenlit the Kree Skrull War?
Well, Stan greenlit it because the thing is, he had created with Jack the Kree, I mean the Skrulls with Fantastic Four number 2, it was pretty old, but the Kree were pretty new. They'd only been introduced in the Fantastic Four a few months before.
Okay.
He'd done just those 2 or 3 stories with Jack. I mean, I'm not trying to cut Jack out. Jack obviously did a lot of the plotting and creating of that too. I don't even know which of them, 2 of them came up with a particular name, or whatever. But it suddenly occurred to me, once he had those, even though there had been a couple of other interstellar races in this story or that, but obviously something in the Fantastic Four, like the Skrulls, the Kree. And I went to Stan, I said, that we got these 2 races running, if you don't have any plans to do anything more with them, and he was still writing Fantastic Four, so he could have. I said, I'd like to, have them have a war, and Earth is just like caught in the middle. And he said, Stan made that great, sounds good to me, that was about it. That was it. I wasn't officially the editor or anything like that, but, Stan, didn't really... we just generally, I would go in and give him an idea and he'd say fine.
Your editorship must have been only months away at that.
It was close. Yeah, it was pretty close.
Okay, yeah, that's why I wasn't sure about the time.
Yeah.
It is this incredible epic. It's, again, I even think the start with Captain Marvel was such a great character. I love the fact, too, that Marvel just kind of, had that name was out there and nobody was using it. Mm-hmm. Fawcett had stopped publishing the original Captain Marvel, and he comes along, a very different character, and again representing the Kree.
Well, Stan has this delusion that he wanted to do the Captain Marvel character. I happen to know that that isn't true. I mean, he believes it. He just doesn't remember. But in '67, Martin Goodman, somebody came to Martin. Stan remembered this at the time because he told it to a couple of college things. But Martin Goodman, the publisher, was approached by somebody who wanted to. He said, if you could use the name Captain Marvel and do a comic about it, I could make it into a TV show. And he wanted it to be science fiction. That's why he has that space thing. I didn't know all those details, some of them until later. I just know that Stan told me Martin Goodman wants me to do a character called Captain Marvel. He didn't mention anything about the TV show. I learned that later. And he said, I don't really want to do it because he said, Captain Marvel it's not like Daredevil. Captain Marvel is still so well known. I mean, I'd get in a cab in New York City in the 60s. And the cabbie would say, and I'd mention for Marvel Comics, he'd say, oh yeah, I love Captain Marvel.
Well, Gomer was doing Shazam on Gomer.
Yeah, right. It was in the culture. And of course, they still had that awful comic book that Myron Fast did. And the lawsuit over that we'll go into.
Where his body would split into different... Yeah.
Unfortunately, got back together again. It was fine. But anyway, that was it. And so Stan had to do it. And you could tell he didn't want to do it, but not only is it a shorter story than usual, like 13, 14 pages, but by the second issue, he just dumped it in my lap with no directions at all. Just, here it is, take it, And luckily, I, was... enjoyed, but I made a terrible mistake on Captain Marvel because I suggested several color schemes for that costume, and unfortunately one of them was white and green. That was one of my great mistakes. But to make it up, I was the one who got him to put the Saturn type of planet. Gene Colan had put it in without. He said, well, you've got to have a chess symbol in there, so I got that. But then I negated it with the green and white. You didn't like it either, right?
No, I just remember Gene didn't like it all that much.
None of us liked it. I didn't like it. It was my idea. I don't know where as soon as I could. We got back to primary colors, when Gil and I did it a couple of years later. But, nobody's perfect.
Well, that's an excuse to obviously talk about Jim's evolution with the character then.
Well, it was... I don't know if you remember, but you gave me Captain Marvel when it was on its death throes.
Was it me or Stan official?
No, you gave it to me.
Okay.
Stan fired me off Iron Man a month or so before because you had us do... Yeah, he said, get these guys off there.
Really? I don't remember that.
Because we did the funny...
Because I know he liked your work from the beginning. He's the one that really hired you originally more, isn't he? Or is it through John?
No, you hired me, basically.
I don't know.
Stan was coming
If he hadn't, I would have,
But Stan saw the issue of Iron Man that Gerber and I did, which was funny after 54, it was 55, I guess.
Yeah.
And he said, I hate it. Get these guys off the book.
Really?
And you actually apologized to me at the point saying, I'm sorry this is happening, but I got another job for you. Mm-hmm. And you said, this is probably not going to last because it's on its death throes. Because you had
You had the great welcome to Marvel. Stan kicked you off a book and I give you a dime. Right? That's great.
Yeah, you said, we'll find you something else afterwards. And I immediately got into Captain Marvel and the sales went up and you kept trying to get me off it. You wanted me to do the Thing book.
Yeah. Which you did.
So I did a couple of them. I said, I want to go back to Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. Come on, stay with me. No. And then she wanted me to stay with Shang-Chi, but I still wanted to get Captain Marvel.
You and Steve only did a few issues of Shang-Chi.
Yeah, I found out who Fu Manchu was.
Oh, okay. That's my fault.
I had never read any.
Okay.
Well, that was Stan's fault. He bought that.
No, I did. That's all mine. That's all mine. I'm proud.
I've been blaming Stan all these years.
No, it's all mine now, and I'm proud. But anyway, we won't talk about that. That's for the Fu Manchu.
Next panel.
But it just was a lot of fun, and you were talking about Von Daniken. That was never onto my radar. Mine was always Wilhelm Reich or Carlos Castaneda or any of that stuff I was reading.
Yeah, Lucas was big on Carlos Castaneda. When I did one of my only plotting sessions with him, he would talk to me about Carlos Castaneda, and he curled up a little fetal ball on the ground, rolling around to explain something. To me, it was just gibberish, but it's great for fiction. I love the idea of fiction. You don't have to believe in it, but it was a great starting point for fiction.
Yeah, my belief is kind of tentative based on that, but it was great material to work with, and between. It was always more the philosophy rather than the science, and I always thought it was more interesting in doing stories. So, like Captain Marvel went from being a warrior to being a holy man, and then we did Warlock afterwards, and he was a holy man to start off with. So
I can take the theme here.
Yeah, so a paranoid schizophrenic suicidal was the only place to go with him.
So you went.
We had fun.
Well, all right, well, first of all, shame on me, because as you mentioned your Iron Man run, and we talked a little bit about it last night with the Infinity Gauntlet, Jim, the creation of Thanos, that came in Iron Man. And, I don't, for the people that, I don't know, who was here last night? Only about half, not even a third. So, tell us about it.
They've forgotten already anyway.
So tell us about creating Thanos, and who's become such an important...
Well, basically, it was a psych class I took in community college after I got out of the service, VA. I was going to take advantage of that. Guest lecturer came in and talked about the Freudian concepts of Eros and Thanos, the lighter and darker side of human nature. I latched onto the darker side and only recently played with that lighter side of it a little bit. Did some sample drawings up, brought them up, and you hired me to work at Marvel. Some of those.
Did you have 2 or 3 characters at the same time or something?
I had Thanos. I had a strange version of the Destroyer.
Mm-hmm. Drax, you mean?
Yes, Drax. Yeah.
Which you said we need another name because there's another Destroyer.
Well, yeah. With the Drax thing, that took care of that thing.
Yeah. So we just came up with that one, and but he was in among the things, and. I think it was Mentor, Heroes, Drax, and Thanos. And Thanos looks really like Mentor from...
He's thinner.
He was much thinner.
Yeah.
And you said bulk him up.
Yeah.
Immediately.
At least I have some good ideas.
Then DC and Marvel, or DC's Dark Side and Thanos over the years kept inflating.
Yeah.
And I really think the whole expansion of their physique gave more the idea that they were the same characters.
Yeah, which they
even
were.
though any of the characters of Kirby I was ripping off was Mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But
So somebody told me that they thought that the Thanos you did, it had, was there really intended to be a vampiric feel to it, vampiric, or is that just somebody's interpretation of what Thanos was originally?
Well, his 2 henchmen were the Blood Brothers, which were...
That would help, yeah.
May have given that impression.
Yeah. The other thing I like, besides the general look at it, and just if he'd be good, he'd be a good character. I was thinking of, I'd seen Darkseid, but there was also Doctor Doom, and just that feeling of the massive characters just sounded appealing. One of the things that I particularly liked is the name Thanos. Because as soon as I saw the name Thanos, as this expression goes, you had me at Thanos, because I loved the name, and I thought that the idea that we weren't going to let a name like Thanos get away. That's a perfect name for a character.
Yeah, it's funny because recently I've been getting a lot of web articles saying that Thanos is a misspelling of Thanatos.
Yeah, right.
Jim Starlin can't spell. But the truth was that do you remember the Greek restaurants in the 70s? Mm-hmm. All the Thanatos.
Yeah, that's right.
I had one 2 blocks down the house from me.
Oh, yeah.
They said, I can't spell. I went past the damn thing every day.
Yeah, there was Thanos, and there was I don't remember the American poet who wrote Thanatopsis is a poem, So I was aware.
Which makes more sense than naming the restaurant Thanatos.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like you're going to death.
So,
let's not argue anything that isn't fresh.
Yeah,
but anyway,
I guarantee you a little bit of botulism with every serve.
You and Stan basically had a good relationship, except he kept having John Reader to draw your faces or something like that.
That was John more. John is more
anticipating
about what Stan wanted.
Yeah, anticipatory, really. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
No, Stan and I started off doing the cover sketches for other artists to do. So every morning I would come in and I would do a sketch up from the Xeroxes of an issue of a book. Then I would come in and take him in to Stan in the afternoon when he showed up, and he'd go, perfect, except. And then he would get up on the desk and he would act out. Do you remember how he did this? Yeah, he would act out how he wanted the pose to be. And,
he got that from me.
Yeah. And how often did he sit on his glasses afterwards? He used to do that with me regularly.
I still have to ask a question. What was it? Because I don't know if we remember this. What was it? Did you get any idea of what was he didn't like about your Iron Man, particularly? Because it looked.
Oh, it's funny. Oh, you really thought
Purely
we were disrespectful to his character?
Oh, but it was drawn like an adventure comic.
Yeah, but Gerber and I had.
Well, Gerber, you're weird. Gerber was weirder.
Stan later on got mad at me about a Nick Fury story that Howard Chaykin and I did. I think this was after you were gone as editor, and he sent out a memo to everybody saying that this story should never be referenced anywhere in the Marvel Universe ever again.
What was it you had done?
He was embezzling money for a formula that would keep him young.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
okay. A little miscalculation of my part. Not the first time.
I can't tell you how much I love being a fly on the wall and hearing these kinds of stories. This is exactly what I was hoping for with these kinds of panels. The visual evolution of Captain Marvel to the more recognizable costume and everything. Because as you guys said, I like the original.
Well, Gene had done that. And if we had done it in different colors, it might have worked a little better. But I made that mistake. But somehow, then one day, it just wasn't going anywhere. I'd written, got off it. Arnold Drake was writing it, and so forth. Changed artists. Don Heck. It just wasn't going anywhere. And I think the color scheme wasn't helping any. And somehow. And one day, I don't remember if it was a weekend, but I woke up at home one of the days I was in my apartment, one of the days I was working, at home as opposed to coming to the office, and I suddenly had this idea that we had to do something with Captain Marvel, and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to swipe Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, which I love as a character. That was magic. This is sort of science, low-level science fiction. So I called up Stan. We had just given the book to Archie Goodman and everything to try to, because I felt he'd do a good job with it. And I called up Stan, and I said, I'll give, I got an idea. I said, of course, this is weird because I didn't have the right to do this. I'm working for Stan. But I said, I'll give you, I have this idea from Captain Marvel, but I'll only tell it to you if I can write it. And so I told it to him. I don't think I went too much into the idea that it was really ripping off the old Fawcett Captain Marvel. I just gave him the story without it and assumed he would have forgotten, the old Captain Marvel. And he said, that's great, all right. So we gave Archie something else. So I saw Archie coming into the building and grabbed the page, and we changed a few drawings in Archie's last story to get the costume in there because it worked out. And then it was sent off to Don Heck. And that was all fine. It was all going to be fine. I was going to try to write it. Then Gil Kane comes waltzing in and tells not me, but Stan, because I didn't really know him, how we sort of had a nodding acquaintance, Gil and I, over the years. And he tells Stan, I'd like to do Captain Marvel. I don't think he called Stan my boy like he did everybody else. He's about the only people who didn't. He said, I'd like to do Captain Marvel. That book is going nowhere. Well, he had that right. And he says, I'd just like to do it. So he says, well, Roy's in charge of that. See what he thinks. So I said, that's great. So just as I yanked the thing away for Archie, now we yanked the plot back from Don Heck, gave him something else to do. He didn't lose a dime on it, didn't care one way or the other, really. And gave it to Gil, and Gil, I think he had Roger Brand. Did you know Roger? The Underground? I think he was an assistant at that time. He broke it down. Gil really loved the story, saw what I was doing, and did it wonderfully. And from that time on, we became, collaborators, whatever we could, with, Iron Fist, Warlock, and stuff like that, and became good friends. And it all sort of grew out of the Captain Marvel collaboration. And it was doing pretty well and everything, but eventually, it was canceled and brought back about twice in those 5 issues Gil and I did together. And then I had to leave it, so when it came back a little later, the second time, gave it to Marv Wolfman and Wayne Boring, the Superman. Wow. I thought it would be funny if the second Superman artist ended up drawing Captain Marvel. That was just my humor. And so Marv Wolfman wrote it, and a little bit it ran through, and then Jim wandered into it and began to work his wonders on it. Yeah, there were a couple issues there. Yeah, so you can tell about how you took it over then.
basically I already have. You said we have this book that's rapidly dying. You had gotten your early sales reports on the Wolfman boring runs, and it was lowered, and you had just expanded out. I think you had 5 new books, and this was way at the bottom. And so you said, do this, and we'll do it. I'll find, once this book gets canceled, I'll find you something else.
Yeah.
And it never got canceled, so I just stayed with it until we went on to Warlock.
Why did you, was it when I was still the editor, did you change the color from the white that Gil had wanted to blonde?
Oh, you suggested that.
I did?
Yes, you said...
I wasn't drinking that much in those days. Really, because I never liked that. Really?
You suggested it because you thought we'd bring in younger readers.
Blonde hair will bring in younger readers. Interesting.
I made you guys take the mustache off Master King Fu. Remember when you brought the drawing in, he had a little mustache, and I said lose the mustache because he looked old.
We had that.
So I guess I had that.
Well, Stan didn't want it.
Did I have to give him freckles too? Well, I mean, make him look younger or something, give him a fishing pole.
I remember Stan didn't like any of the Asian faces on the
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's why we ended up making him Eurasian. And a lot of that had to do with the quality of my drawing at that time, to be fair.
Oh, I think it looked fine.
Well, I thought it didn't work. Looking back at him, I think, okay, maybe it was best to go with the face that was on the costume design. Basically, the blonde hair was... I was going to do all these changes in him at that point, and you suggested the blonde hair for the younger things. So I just tossed it in. It was kind of a nice little bit because at one point he goes, without looking in the mirror, goes, "Oh, and I have this blonde hair now."
He just knew he did.
Yeah, he just...
Was it my suggestion or was it your idea to swipe Steve Ditko's Captain Atom trail, that he had done on Captain Atom, where the little atomy or bubbly things coming after him, which in my mind was like Ditko's Captain Atom that I have loved from the late 50s.
Yeah,
but
I loved it too.
I don't know if it was my idea or
remember which one of us suggested.
Doesn't matter.
Plagiarism, whichever one of us.
Yeah, we swiped it, whatever it was. It wasn't like it was our idea. Yeah. We're standing here, we swiped Captain Marvel, we swiped Captain Atom, we swiped Fu Manchu. We never made anything up,
That's awesome.
We just moved it around,
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I don't think there's anything really original, almost in life, period. Everything else has been done at some point or another.
Yeah, it's all synthesis.
Yeah.
Cultural, whatever.
Change it around. Everybody's got 2 eyes. It's the first one character has 3. Is that the original one?
Yeah.
Now, I've got a ton of key moments to talk about, but I also want to open up to you guys and women. So if you do have questions, start, and then I'll even be happy to take them now. I don't know. And if not, I'm ready to go to something. All right. Gentleman in the back. Yes, sir. Yeah, you. Jedi.
Loudly, please.
Wow.
I'll interpret it for you.
All right, so with the advent of the Kree Skrull War, do you think Marvel Comics overall became more cosmic? I mean, Claremont was introducing the Shi'ar into the X-Men. Do you think that basically your introduction of a larger cosmic scale with the Marvel Universe affected?
I think it probably had some influence, but on the other hand, it was just continuing on the road that was already being taken. The Kree had just come in, that was opening things up. You had the Skrulls already, and it was just, you're looking for new material. Now, once I did, then somebody else could look at the Kree Skrull War and say, I can take it one step further, or one step this way or that, or even not even think about the Kree Skrull War, but just have his own ideas. It's just a natural evolution. You have to take something somewhere. I think it was influential, but if it hadn't happened, something else probably, would have. And of course, now with the Kree Skrull War, I never want to mention it without saying that, John Buscema, one of the best artists ever in comics. His brother Sal was pretty good too, and he did the early issues where we established the Captain Marvel connection. But of course, as I would be the second to tell you, the important artist that came on the book, that book was Neil Adams, and he came on and took a step, upward. And you know why I'm the second person to say that.
I'm glad you guys are mentioning the
But
artist.
I'm right.
And truly an epic story. And I'm glad you mentioned Gil as well. Jim, I want to get into the death of Captain Marvel, but before I do, who do you guys think were, and Jim, certainly your art was among those great cosmic artists and stuff, but who were the great Marvel cosmic artists that really understood the scope of space?
Kirby.
Certainly, of course.
Yeah.
He's the architect.
The name above the title, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you say, Gil Kane and everything. But others beyond the greatness of Jack Kirby, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there were beautiful jobs. A number of these other artists you've mentioned along the way. The cosmic stuff, the space stuff. You get tired of robbing bank stories, and I've got a bomb I'm going to blow up the city with. I mean, it was good to get out of off Earth. We had the Silver Surfer who was stuck on Earth for the longest time, and I think it was you finally freed him up. No,
I don't know.
Later. I think it was later on.
Yeah, I think it was later. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he should have been out there from the beginning, but we just.
Well, Stan kind of wanted. I think Stan wanted to keep him earthbound for a while because to keep it down there. But then but then as you start expanding, he's been on Earth for a long time. Maybe it's time for him to go back into space. Where he started. And as far as if you're talking about cosmic people at Marvel, if the first person is Jack Kirby, the second most important one, for the sake of of the history of it, would be Jim. Really.
I would agree, absolutely.
I mean, with all due respect to John Dicen and Neil Adams and the rest, the next real step would be you.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have been there without Steve Ditko and his Doctor Strange along the way. So.
Yeah. Even Doctor Strange, it isn't science fiction, but it has that same.
But it has that feel, and that thought occurred to me as well because it was more the astral plane. But again, there is that kind of sci-fi kind of.
Yeah. Well, Jim's the guy that mixed them all up, though. By the time he was done, you couldn't tell what was magic and what was science. And everything. The rest of us had the compartments. With Jim, it's like sort of a stew.
I hear you, man.
That's because I have a hard time telling what's real and what's not real.
You're in good company here.
Jim, I remember when The Death of Captain Marvel came out, and it was this graphic novel event. And it really was. It was, and forgive me for making it a personal story, but man, we had the direct market then, and it really did feel like an important book. And I know, obviously, you talked about it last night, and if you don't mind today, talking about the personal side of the story as well.
Okay, my own father had passed away the year before from cancer, so it was percolating around inside me, and Jim Shooter asked me to kill off Captain Marvel because they didn't know what to do with him and they wanted to make him a woman. Sounded reasonable to me. So I came up with at least 3 or 4 plots before I finally settled on this one, and they were all the standard hero dies in a blaze of glory at the end of it, and I really didn't want to have to draw those stories. And so somewhere along the line the connection was made. Unlike when you were the editor, that Jim Shooter had a bunch of assistant editors. So I sent the plot in, and every one of the assistant editors loathed it. They simply hated it. And the only person who liked it up there was Shooter, and he gave me the green light, and I guess he made the right decision because it sold pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Incredible book, absolutely. And I'm glad we mentioned the fact that obviously then the powers turned to Ms. Marvel, who became, of course, currently Captain Marvel, and it's been a wonderful evolution of the character. Carol Danvers started in your hands, Roy, and tell us about the beginnings of Carol Danvers.
God, I hardly remember. Stan dumped this book in my lap, and it was set at this place called the Cape, which we all knew was really the Cape Canaveral. And for some reason, Stan didn't want these exact names. It became the Cape, and the guy in charge, you'd think he'd have to be called General something. He's the Old Man or something. I don't know why Stan had one of these vague names, but eventually. So I don't remember if Stan had the idea for a woman head of security, or if it was mine, or what. We needed a woman there anyway. At least one. We had Medic Una or whatever it was on the space thing, and so I just made up a character to be the. I don't even think she had a last name in the first issue. It was just Carol. When I finally had to have a name, I was looking for a last name, and somehow or other I settled on Danvers, which only later I realized is also the last name of the adopted name of Supergirl, I think, by a weird.
Of course, yes.
I had no conscious memory of that, or I would definitely not have used that name, but it's just a last name anyway. And she was just an in and out character. I never thought of her as having any great destiny, and the next thing you know, she became, Ms. Marvel. What was the other name she had in between? That wasn't Nova. It was Binary.
Binary. I forgot.
And now she's been promoted. to captains who should be General Marvel, and, and President Marvel and all that.
Well, Kelly Sue DeConnick took the ball and ran with it, and certainly, created the modern Captain Marvel as Carol Danvers and stuff. But Jim, a nice spin with a lot of your female creations. Nebula and Gamora.
I didn't create Nebula.
Forgive me, I thought you had.
I think it was Mark Rumo or something.
Oh, I see.
I only tortured Nebula. I was offended by the whole idea of Thanos having offspring. So as soon as I got a hold of her, merciless. I'm really kind of embarrassed by the way I treated her at this point.
Decomposing alien.
Yeah, so I look back at that and I'm going, how misanthropic of me. Geez.
Oh, well, yeah, okay, I respect that, absolutely.
Yeah, but Gamora was around, and I did a lot with Moondragon, too.
Indeed, Moondragon's a great character, absolutely.
Yeah. Keep waiting for her to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
I'm hoping Pitt comes first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone likes to she can tell me what
That sounds good. More questions from the audience? Way in the back, sir. Or miss. Sir. Yeah, you, sir.
I'm just curious big fan of both your guys. I've been a huge fan for a long time with Mr. Starlin, with your creation of Thanos and everything like that. And I know you learned a lot from Jack Kirby when he made Dark Side. What do you think someone here from you would win in a fight?
Whoever strikes first. Simple as that. Next question.
Yes, sir. In the hat. Yep.
I just have a question for Mr. Starlin. What do you think about how Thanos was portrayed in Infinity War?
I'm still having a little trouble with those pupils. But, they brought me down to the set before the movie came out. We talked things. There was no surprises. I never expected to be a carbon copy of the book because half the characters aren't there in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think they just did a wonderful job. Josh Brolin, who was never on my radar as Thanos, now I can't imagine anybody else doing him. What can I tell you? Everybody here loved it, so why should I be any different?
And you were saying last night that he really loves the character.
Yeah, he's allowed me to get into the Eternals movie. He wants to play Thanos again.
Awesome. Don't you think they'll kill him off at some stage, Thanos? Well, he's already dead, so why not?
Yeah, well, we got to get through this next movie, and we can't talk about what happens to him during that movie, or the mouse comes along and breaks my kneecap.
Sir.
I have a question for Roy. Speaking of the movies, since the new Captain Marvel movie is going to feature like the Kree Skrull War background, have you been involved? Are they invited to the set or anything like that at all?
What, you mean consult with me or something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
No, they just take the stuff and do what they want to and send me a small check occasionally, and I'm very happy. I go see the movies and see what they do with them. Sometimes I like it, and sometimes I don't. Mostly I do. I may quibble with particular details or, like some things more than others.
Like the pupils.
Yeah, right. See? Like when they did Ultron, who's my favorite Avengers villain.
Talk about that, right?
He didn't look like didn't look as much as I would have liked him to. Like the version that I particularly had done in there, I would have liked that. But other than that, and the fact that I wasn't as wild about the plot, some of the aspects of the plot, I knew exactly what Ultron was trying to accomplish. But the general feel of that villain and the way the writing and James Spader in the reading of the part was just to me flawless, and everything. The only thing I don't like is thinking of it as a minion of Thanos, but I guess everybody was a minion of Thanos. Even Loki was a minion of Thanos, so...
That's true,
It was very funny when the first movie came out, I ran into Roy at a convention, and you mentioned something about Thanos at the end of the thing. I said, yeah, that's pretty cool. And you turned to me and you went very seriously. I'm pretty sure you weren't serious, but you went very seriously. It should have been Ultron. And the very next movie, it was Ultron.
I was probably serious, but not that I didn't think Thanos, also made a great villain. But to me, Ultron became sort of, by accident. It wasn't intended to be my idea, of a good villain. But they were both good. They both got their shot. In in my case, I guess due to Joss Whedon, who particularly wanted to do it. I mean, there was nothing inevitable about Ultron and even the Vision, but especially Ultron being a part of the second movie, and that was one of his conditions for doing it. Who was the person who got Thanos started? Because that was started. Was it also?
Yeah, Whedon.
Yeah, because it was before.
Two and one man only he threw it in. And he just recently said he had no idea what he was going to do with Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
He said. Had absolutely no concept of. I figured I'd work myself into a corner. Fortunately, he left the movies, and so the other guys, the Russos took care of it from there.
Yeah.
But we both owe Whedon.
So let's see who who's left to be. Who will, if they do another Avengers movie after that? Who will be
the next big bad?
The next big. The next big Avengers.
Yeah, Kang would be good. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there aren't that many wonderful Avengers those to be. Of course, I haven't seen everyone.
And
but
with
yeah,
time
you're right.
travel,
Kang would be great. He could be Doctor Doom, or he could not be Doctor Doom.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
But with time travel, you could even maybe go back to some of the great Golden Age characters, which would be kind of interesting too.
Don't get me wrong.
Roy and I are the other ones who are little.
I'm waiting for the Fox deal and have Galactus come back.
Of course, yes.
Absolutely. You didn't like the way they did Galactus in the
Mr. Cloud.
Yeah. I think you should find the same, whatever the villain was for the Green Lantern movie. He was the same guy. The two nebulous clouds could fight each other and produce a rainstorm.
That's a really scary, puffy villain.
Yeah. Two mistakes of the same kind in two different studios.
Sponsored by the Weather Channel.
Right.
Absolutely. Miss, in the back with the glasses. Yes, miss.
Okay. I love Infinity Watch, Mr. Starlin. It's one of my favorite stories. And I just wanted to know why, when you split the gauntlet and gave everyone a gem, did you know who you wanted to give it to personally? Like, did you know?
Yeah, I made those choices. So somewhere along the line, I figured out I knew what I was doing. But no, they were all characters that I had been associated with in the past, and they were just people that I thought would work together interestingly because they wouldn't work together well. And I just had to go somewhere with them, and so splitting them up would seem like the best idea. And as you remember from the first issue, Warlock gives it away and then goes, "You're on your own," and left. And so it was going to be a book that worked against expectations from the start.
Sir.
How did you end up with Warlock?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. Let's get into Warlock.
I had left Marvel and Captain Marvel and gone over to DC for a while and came back and talked to this gentleman here one afternoon. And he said, "Why don't you go home and figure out what you want to do next?" And I had a box of comics back in my apartment, and it was another beautiful Gil Kane design character. So I went back there the next day, and you just told me to go at it.
Yeah.
And I sat down that night and drew the first page.
Yeah, because the Warlock, I wish I had, in my own way, I wanted to continue the version that Gil and I had done with the Counter-Earth kind of stuff. I enjoyed it. But once I wasn't doing it anymore, and it kind of ran out of steam, there was no sense in, trying to perpetuate that if you had another idea. I think the only thing I ever disagreed with was you wanted to take the lightning bolt off it.
I got all
but that's as soon as possible. It was probably about 3 minutes after I left as editor-in-chief. Probably. I don't know if I'd let you do that. Maybe the second issue. Okay, but but it was really interesting because it was such a cosmic thing, and I didn't have to wrestle with. Am I going to have trouble with Stan over all this religious stuff he wants to do? Because I'm gone. Let Marv Wolfman wrestle with it.
And they were so busy getting used to their job, and nobody paid anything.
Yeah, by the time Len got used to it, he's gone. And then Marv is in it, so you could sort of run on your own and everything. And eventually, it became a real, classic series of books. It always was. Just took a while to recognize. The interesting thing is, I know this for a fact that this is not to dare you because I've had worse sellers, but it wasn't even a good seller the first time around. Jerry Conway, when he was in there for about 3 weeks as editor-in-chief, he told me that he looked up sales here. He'd sold less than Golem, which was the series that had followed. But it doesn't matter because in the long run, it's been a huge hit. Because, with all the reprintings and everything that's come out of it, and, you can't, at one time, the only judgment we had was, what did it sell this month, and then we're on to the next, and if it didn't sell this month and this issue, it's a failure forever. Nowadays, you can look at the long picture and say Warlock, was a huge hit, and which is nice.
Do you remember why it eventually got canceled, though?
I was going with that.
but they ran out of paper in Canada from the company, and they had to cancel like 3 or 4 books at the time.
When was this? 70 what?
I'm no good at years.
Okay, all right.
But I
But it was
remember
after
War
my
of the
time.
Worlds got canceled, Warlock got canceled. I'm sure Gollum must have been there too.
Well, Gollum was gone long ago.
Oh, maybe Gollum was gone, but there was about 3 or 4 books that they canceled just because there was no paper to print.
Probably read some in the Invaders.
Yeah.
There you go. Jeez. I want to ask you guys about Epic Illustrated because when beyond and also the black and white period as well, the magazines, because a lot of cosmic stuff. Star-Lord came from the black and white magazines, of course, and Epic Illustrated I always thought was cool. And I don't know how much you guys contributed to that portion of Marvel Cosmic, but I always thought that was really ambitious. World-building storytelling.
You were gone by then.
By Epic.
Yeah.
Archie was the editor, and so was Shooter, who put Archie into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't sure in the story.
No, I had nothing. I had stuff in it. I had I had an Elric adaptation in it, and then I did a 4-part adaptation of Almuric, the novel by Robert E. Howard, which was sort of half Conan, half John Carter of Mars. And
cool.
But that was really my only. I never just tried to submit anything else to it.
Okay.
And Dreadstar started it in the first issue.
Of course, yes. Yes, absolutely, Dreadstar. Smattering of applause for
And
Dreadstar.
by the way, I would take this moment to shamelessly plug the fact that next year, about at this time, I will have a complete collection of all the Dreadstar stories I ever wrote. I was horrified to find out it's over 1,200 pages.
Wow!
So next year at this time, I'm working through color corrections at this point.
That's awesome, man. Honestly, again, a really significant period. That 80s black and white period and stuff was amazing. And I'd forgive me if it wasn't always black and white, but I was considered part of that era, Dreadstar and everything. And just
Was Dreadstar in black and white partly, or was it all color?
It started off in 3 sections: the Metamorphosis, Odyssey, black and white. Archie needed color fill in because he wasn't enough pages. It became color. Then I did another black and white in Price.
Okay.
I thought I remembered some black and white.
Yeah,
there's a lot of black and white, and it will stay that way when it comes out.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like Colorado. You don't want to change around.
There you go.
What it is.
Yeah, keep it pure, absolutely.
Because it went through all sorts of different stages. It was painted. We went up to ink. We had that hand separation stuff. Went over to first, where they had that experimental, strange coloring thing.
Yes.
And so on. So
there was the anime version.
Yeah, so all the different versions of it kind of a part of the whole strangeness of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question. Way in the back, sir, with the beard.
We're on the subject of Dreadstar. What about Metamorphosis Odyssey, where all this kind of springs from? Infinity War, the battle between the Assyrians and the Zygots, the fact that the Assyrians created man, whole man, or wielder of the sword, never really truly trusted him. And then becomes a hero when they destroy the Milky Way, and he goes off into another galaxy. I mean, it's kind of an interesting sort of, you're building a mythology there that you haven't really been seen until Neil Gaiman started doing similar things with the American gods. So, what inspired you to do Metamorphosis Odyssey? What was the impetus? Because it's so rich in its philosophical and its moral facets.
Drugs.
I like the applause for drugs.
No, seriously, it's just I like complicated stories. I like complicated characters. Batman has much more interest in the right than Superman. The quirkier they are, the more interesting it is where you can take them. And Dreadstar was a guy who started off tremendous amount of guilt, contradictory motivations as you go through. His parents were killed by polar bears. In response, he decimates the entire population of polar bear cat on this planet before he's driven off. So it's not he's not a hero. He's just a very tough guy with very complicated motivations, and I just found him interesting doing it that way.
Okay, we got time for probably one more question. Sir, go ahead.
The Dreadstar saga, I'm pretty sure closed and you said you have 1,200 pages because I never followed it to the end. I remember
Yeah, we have a bit of a closing on a lot of the characters. Left some things open. Peter David did some writing on it afterwards where some of the core characters went off. I'll be leaving it like that. We're probably not going to go into the Peter David stuff in this collection because legal complications. But basically, a number of the characters like Ultraviolet, Syzygy, and a couple other ones came to the complete end of their story. So choosing this particular run will give it a nice ending to, it'll give it a package that feels like it's complete. So that's why I've chosen those.
All right, Captain America, close us out.
Are there any key characters or stories that you had thought about or developed at some point in your career as Roy and Jim? Marvel, DC, anywhere that you never got to do and you just wish you had done at some point?
In my case, I'd like to write about 500 more issues of All-Star Squadron and and Conan. Other than those three things, you know, I don't really think in those terms that much anymore. I just read history nowadays. You know.
I had a submariner story I wanted to do for Marvel after 9/11, but it wasn't patriotic enough, and so they just let me sit around for a year and a half and never improved it. You know.
Man. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your world building. Thank you for your contributions to the comic culture. And thank you for this great conversation. I was happy to be a fly on the wall.
Thank you very much for herding cats up here.
Unbelievable stuff. Roy Thomas and Jim Starlin closing things out on today's Word Balloon. A great conversation about a lot of science fiction work that came out of Marvel. I hope you enjoyed it. This episode was brought to you by Aftershock Comics, shaking things up at your local comic shop right now with hit series like Animosity by Marguerite Bennett and Raphael De La Tour, Baby Teeth with Donny Cates and Gary Brown, and A Walk Through Hell by Garth Ennis and Goran Sudzuka. Check out what's rumbling now and how to order your favorite books from your local comic shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon today. Great stuff still to come. Can I tell you who's already in the can and can't wait to share with you coming up? How about Alex Ross? How about Ben Blacker is back to talk not only about some new comic book projects he has at Vertigo and at Marvel, but also a look at what's going on in the television world right now. Our dear friend Ashley Robinson is back to talk about a new Kickstarter that she and Jason Inman have working, a new book called Science, kind of a Starfleet Academy, Harry Potter sort of pastiche. I'll let her explain when you hear that episode. But Brian Hitch is coming up. Yeah, Brian Hitch. How about that, man? Unbelievable conversation. In fact, that's the next episode of Word Balloon. Stay tuned for that. That's going to be great. We talk about the Ultimates line, and not only that, but lots of other great things. Of course, Brian is kicking it on Hawkman right now for DC. He's got some amazing plans for DC in the future. And we also talk about his storyboard work on, of all things, Doctor Who and Star Trek. Who the hell knew? I didn't know. He worked on the J.J. Abrams movie. Did you know that? He also worked on Doctor Who in its first season with Chris Eccleston and produced by Russell T. Davies. I didn't know that. Well, now I'll share those stories with you and Brian Hitch on the next episode of Word Balloon. I hope you'll join me. Lots of really great characters. Well, they are characters. They're creators, but they are characters. And you know from their conversations here on Word Balloon. Some old-time favorites are coming back, some great new people as well. And very, very excited about what I have for you in store for the rest of September, going into October. And we still have Terrificon panels to release. Man, I am. It's an embarrassment of riches as far as conversations here at Word Balloon. Really happy to share them with you. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.
There's a time and a place for black and white, like when you're learning to play piano, or when you want a big two-toned cookie, or when shopping for a pet zebra. But if you want to attract customers, there's no room for black and white. So go to Staples. Staples specializes in bold, hard-to-miss color printing. And now at Staples, get 20% back in rewards on color printing, from banners to brochures and copies to presentations. Print more color, save more money at Staples.
In-store only. Ends 11/10/18. Restrictions apply. See store associate or staples.com/20 back for details. Today, I will not stress over the things I cannot control. If you live with anxiety or depression, you're not alone. Linden Oaks Behavioral Health is here to help you manage your symptoms so you can live your best life. Visit eehealth.org/anxiety, and our experts will connect you with treatment in your area, including our location in Hinsdale. Help for anxiety and depression close to home. Linden Oaks Behavioral Health.